Hello, Final Fantasy tubers, and welcome back to a new episode, Let's Play, Showcase, something or other. I'm not sure what I'm going to title this one just yet. With me, BlueAnkylo. So, I'm just going to give you a sneak peek at what to expect this episode, although early episode we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about randomizers and sprite editing and stuff. But I will eventually get to actual gameplay of starting a new random run with my cool new character art that I specifically personally made. So don't let anyone lie, I did all this myself, and it's not 100% finished, but I'm actually pretty happy with it. So just a sneak peek of what it will look like. This is just a test run that I've been having. It is a randomized run, so you might see more than one Mazmune if you get lucky. But anyway, look at the new character art. And it applies to your battle or your map sprites as well. So that's pretty awesome. I'm not 100% happy with all of the. I'm not sure why you stand above. I think this is part of the sprite edit, perhaps. Like you walk. Was it always like that? Yeah, certain tiles you don't walk behind. And we'll do like one round of combat just to show you that yeah, everything works. I mean, Final Fantasy 1 doesn't have a ton of animations, but it has a few, and they're all in there. So so there you go. That's your sneak peek. So let's talk about how I got here and what we're going to actually do for today's episode. Let me close this down temporarily. Switch over to the Firefox. So, the main thing that makes this possible is Final Fantasy 1 Randomizer. I'm sure you could find it if you Google. It's very easy to set up if you can find a NES ROM. Thank you, DLC. We'll turn this down a little bit. Just playing some Final Fantasy 1 Origins while we get set up here. So, yeah, this is the main thing that'll get you going. Now, editing your sprites is advanced computer work, but playing the randomizer is quite easy, so we'll talk about that later. I'm not going to go through, like, all of the various versions and updates. Suffice to say that it's still being actively improved, and if you watched a previous randomizer with me, maybe a year ago or so was the last time I opened it up, they have continuously improved this thing, and I can say nothing bad about it. It is friggin' amazing. The guys that are working on this they have really done a lot of work making new features that are fun and interesting that you don't have to use, but you can certainly enable them if you like, and lots of good options. So we'll talk about that in a second, what some of the flags mean and how I like to set up my runs, and specifically what we're going to set up for today's game. The one I want to talk about on this page, though, specifically before we get anywhere, is this little 3 battle palettes thing. This is what enables my character sprite hack to actually work better. It's not required, but if you played the NES Final Fantasy 1, you might realize that most of the vanilla characters basically have, well, really realistically 2 different colors. You're either red and white, with technically black and beige if you look at their face, but those black and beige barely count. But it's red and white for like almost all of them. White mage, fighter, knight, red mage, red wizard, white wizard, ninja. Almost everything's just red with white, or white with red. There's a few with brown and blue, like Thief, Black Belt, Master. There's gotta be a couple more than that, somewhere hidden in there. Black Mage, normal Black Mage, and Black Wizard. So, like if you look at some of the older sprites back here, that's your color scheme. You got red and white or brown and blue, and that was it. Brown, blue, yellow, I guess, technically, instead of having beige. Technically it's 3 colors plus black, but whatever. Anyway, because of this hack, you're allowed to use 3 different palettes. It's still 3 palettes of 3 colors, but that means you could have red, white, green, brown, blue, something, if you want. And you can pick your colors. So all along, there have been character edits, because obviously you can do some bitmap editing and change the drawing so it looks different. It's these are 16 by 24 pixels, so you've got a little bit of room to play with. But you were very limited on colors because of the NES. But now you can have 3 different color palettes for all of your 12 jobs, technically. You can't have more than 3 split across the 12, essentially. So you got to find similar classes that use similar color schemes and then sort of work with that. And that's what I decided to do. I happened to realize that Final Fantasy IV has exactly the same dimensions of character animations. It's still 16 by 24, which is very convenient because I'm not an artist. So that's fair. It's just, Super Nintendo had more than 3 or 4 colors per palette, per sprite. I think it's 16, if I remember correctly. Anyway, so we lost some shading and some details, but it actually wasn't that hard to import them over. And I did do the map graphics as well, and those are even simpler. But in fact, I think they're 16 by 16, is it? Or 8? It's not 8 by 8, is it? No, 16 by 16. So you know, anyway, so this is what enables that. So if you want to do multiple colors, you have to use the randomizer. Now you don't have to make a random ROM. Technically, there's settings for vanilla or, you know, the basic game, so all the progression and everything's the same. There are like bug fixes you might want to apply anyway, but if you want to do it with just improved gameplay that's, you know, fixes some bugs, makes the game play a bit faster, but there's no randomization. You could do that, and that would enable, for instance, the ability to do color. Specifically, you have to do the 3 battle palette. That's an extra switch you have to put on. So anyway, that's really cool, and I did spend quite a long time working on this, so I just want to blabber about it a little bit longer. This is the software that I had to use to, like, it's one thing to open up Photoshop or Paint or something and just draw some bitmaps. That's not too hard. If you understand how, like, color palettes in bitmaps works, a little bit of color indexing and stuff, you can probably pick it up. That part's not too hard. Getting them into the game is the harder part. So the way I did it was using this program called Final Fantasy Hackster. You can find it on Zophar's domain and a variety of hacking sites if you're interested. What you want to do is download it. It's not an install sort of thing. You just run it. It's got a class editor, and I'll open that up for you guys. Go, maybe make it a little bit more visible. That's a bit too large. Still a little bit too large. Sorry for the unprofessional here, but yeah. So anyway, this is your character editor or class editor. Technically, you could cheat and change a bunch of stuff. That's not what I was interested in. It's these 2 buttons on the top right. Oh, you can't see my mouse over. Sorry, but if you could see the mouse, which I must have disabled somewhere, the top 2 right buttons, edit battle pick and edit map man pick. Those are where we're gonna go, and this is where things get tricky. So again, I have to open up this window for you. Oh, I see what's happening. Just a sec. Just gotta... You know what? Let's just close that down. Oh, it's not picking up the... Just a sec. Sorry, guys. I thought I had this all set up ahead of time. Where's my battle picks? There we go. Okay, now you can see what I'm seeing. So, once you get to this screen, you can kind of see how the sprites are laid out. You've got like a standing sprite, a walking sprite, walking, swinging... victory / magic. It's kind of a shared sprite. Again, you can't see my mouse. Oh, you can see my mouse. Okay. Regular, like waiting pose, moving forward pose, attacking. Those are the 2 attacking poses. Victory after the end of the combat, or it's like the dance victory. It's this. I think it's these 2 back and forth. Or when you cast a spell. So if you're using a caster, you might want your victory pose to be a spell casting pose. Wounded, either low HP, poisoned, etc., and just straight dead. So those are the sprites. This is the one that's technically 24 by 16, but it's just on its side. And then you have to choose between 3 color palettes. I'm not going to do a huge tutorial on this, trust me, but you choose 3 colors. These 3 colors are assigned to these 3 slots, and those you can't use the 4th one. Normally, you only can use 1 and 2, but because of the randomizer, you can use 3. It technically disables the stone color. Like normally when you're turned to stone, you turn kind of gray. By using this slot, you kind of remove that effect. But how often do you get turned to stone? And something happens, so you can still tell if you're turned to stone. You're small and your color is random. I think it depends on the enemy palette as well. Like it just moves it around a little bit. You'll look like something has happened. Depends on what you're fighting. Anyway, so these 3 colors, you get 3 slots. Slot 1, slot 2, slot 3. And then for each character, that was the fighter... Let me open up somebody else. Wrong one. And of course, we lost the screen as soon as I switched it over. Nope. Nope. Yes. Okay. So then if you look at a different one, this is my Thief tile set. This is in currently, pick palette number 2, and I have 3 different colors. And that's basically how I did it. And you can use this bitmap option to export your template. You can't see it, but there's a bitmap button and an export. That'll export just the bitmap of this file with the 4 if you count black indexes for your bitmap file. And then if you're very, very careful, you can import it back. Although sometimes you're going to have to do some very careful like sprite editing in here to touch it up. It doesn't always import perfectly. So I spent quite a lot of time. Anyway, I'm just going on and on. It's pretty cool. Make sure you save it when you're done. And then when you go back to this screen, make sure you save it here as well. There's a save button in here. I haven't actually played with any of the other settings. I've just done the map and battle pick options. It took a lot of time. Like this took, I don't know, probably 20 or 30 hours because I'm not a graphic artist. And once you're all done, your original NES file, your Final Fantasy 1 NES file is updated. You'll need to use that specific file to upload here on the randomizer site using the one with the edited graphics. Then you make a random seed, you'll download the seed, and then you'll actually have the game with the graphics in it. Sorry for those of you who want a more in-depth tutorial. Maybe I'll eventually think of that once I'm more comfortable. But I just wanted to at least explain, because when I was trying to figure this out, I couldn't find any idea of where to get started. That'll at least get you started. That's the software you need and the general work progress. You're going to need to be halfway good with MS Paint or Photoshop if I can't tutorial those things. Okay, so that's how I got the sprites in. I'm using Final Fantasy 4 sprites, as you've probably determined by now. You could use any sprites. You could draw them yourself, as long as you're good at pixel art. So now the randomizer. I'm going to play a seed with you today, or at least start one. I have my preferred settings, and I'm also going to make this a fairly easy run, because I primarily want to showcase the sprites and just sort of have some fun with you guys. So not all of these options are selected by default if you start with, you know, beginner or whatever. Sometimes they have like tournament flags. Anyway, it's always a good idea to re-roll your seed. Just click the new seed button. If you want to import or export, like once I'm finished all the flags, this is how, if you want to play the exact same seed as me, if you upload your ROM and import the same character string here, then you get automatically the same seed and flag as, well, actually, I think you have, no, flags and seed. So you have to import this and this to get the exact same file. Anyway, I'll leave those in the video description if I'm smart. So let's talk a little bit about some of these things. Some of these are new, and I have kind of an opinion on some of them. I like shop shuffle. Otherwise, you get kind of the vanilla shops, and I mean that's good for progression. This makes it easier for sure, especially if you put random weapons and armor, including the awesome gear. Now this is probably a little bit overpowered, I would say, for if you want a difficult run. But this means perhaps you can buy 4 Mazmunes or 4 ribbons or 4 magic nuke staff or something, you know, whatever. Anyway, or nothing. It doesn't have to include, it's randomized. But that certainly is a very powerful option that's probably stronger than vanilla, because normally you can't buy magic spells or the best equipment. You have to find them. Random weapons and armor, though, is pretty safe. Magic shop shuffle, I don't like. It causes too much hassle trying to memorize it. If you do this, you almost definitely have to take notes. This makes it so a town that usually sells a given level of magic, like say Corneria Town sells level 1 white and black magic. Now it doesn't, like, we're gonna shuffle the spells inside their levels, so maybe we'll have nuke level 1, but Corneria will always sell level 1 magic. If you check this off, Corneria will sell random levels of spells. Could be level 2, 8, 5, 4, 3, whatever. It's cool, and it does sort of balance off the chance of getting level 1 nuke. Like, it's a good balancing option, but it means I have to like take notes, because if you see a spell that you can't learn, you have to remember to come back later. Or it's more complicated, especially for red mages, because if they can learn, you know, 3 spells total, but they can learn 7 out of 8 level 1 spells, or probably all the level 2 spells. I forget the exact, but anyway, you don't know what those spells will be. So if you buy them early, if you fill up your red mage's level 1 slots with the first 3 spells you find, you might end up missing out on, you know, nuke or life 2 or something. So it makes it harder to keep track of things. I don't like it very much. Keep permissions. Basically, if you shuffle the levels, the slot is whether or not the character can cast it. So like a red mage, generally speaking, can't learn the harm spells, is a simple one. The white magic harm spells. So any harm slot, you know, level 1 slot, whatever, level 3 slot, whatever, those are blocked off even in the shuffler. So if Fade falls in a harm slot, a red mage won't be able to learn it. If you keep permissions, I believe the idea is it's still just harm. So you'll be able to learn whatever spells you could normally learn, except, so you'll never learn Fade on your red wizard that way, but you'll definitely be able to learn What's a good spell that the red mage usually learns? I don't know. Whatever it is. I don't think this one matters too much. Item magic shuffles the magic casting spells, so this can make things way more difficult or way easier, depending on your luck. If you're relying on a strategy, especially like a solo challenge, where you require a ruse, defense sword that casts ruse on your caster to stay alive, you might not get ruse. If you're relying on Thunder 2 or Ice 2 from Zeus's Gauntlet or the Black Robe, you might not get those. Now, you'll probably get something comparable. There's a lot of good spells in the roster. Any level 3 Fire, Ice, Lightning, Nuke, Fade, they will all be way better than normal if you get lucky with those. There are other defensive spells that are good. You might get a Cure 4 Axe. That would probably be way better than anything else anyway. So it just depends on your luck, but I like it because it throws in some randomization. So probably going to spend the most time on this screen, to be honest. Enemy scripts. This is... I forget the exact details. I believe this is abilities. It randomizes which enemies get which abilities, like Thunder. Not the spells. Well, skills are probably the... I don't know. I generally just leave both of these checked off. The combination essentially means that you could get imps with Cremate, or Thunder, or Nuke. I think the spell list is like certain enemies have a spell list and they cast them in order. First spell is Fire 1, second spell Fire 2, third spell Fire 3. They'll always cast them in that order. It should randomize the list of spells. Like, there are some enemies like, is it Evil Men, I think, that technically have Nuke. It's just not the first spell in their roster, so you rarely see it because you usually kill them so quickly. Status attacks is like on hit effects, so Paralyzed Touch, Death Touch, Stone Touch, Sleep Touch. That gets randomized across... By enemy script, this is like all enemies could potentially get those spells and abilities. If you don't want to see imps with... first enemy of the game, imps with Death Touch, make sure you turn that off. But to be fair, I think we'll be okay. Unrunnables are the standard, usually boss encounters. They'll still be unrunnable. But you know how in a dungeon, there's some random encounters that you just can never run away from? Traditionally, earth, water, fire elementals, and lots of other things. This just shuffles it. You never know what you'll find. If you're lucky, they'll be on imps, and you don't even care. Well, imps would be annoying because you'd fight a lot, but something that you don't see very often or doesn't really matter because you can kill it. If you're unlucky, it'll be on something really tough with Death Touch and Nuke and Thunder or something, and you'll have to fight them every time or try to avoid them. First strike chance is some enemies like shadows are particularly good at ambushes. This is a dangerous dangerous thing. By default, it's don't shuffle encounters. If you randomize encounter zones, this means that in your first area of the map, like around the starter area, you could run into other enemies beside imps and wolves and easy stuff that even with random stats are still pretty easy because an imp with 50% more HP is still not that bad. But if you if the first encounter zone was full of, I think actually the first encounter zone is off limits, if I remember correctly. But, Garland's Castle or Elfland area, the sea. If you're stuck always fighting, I don't know, endgame enemies from Temple of Fiends Revisited, you're going to have a bad time just escaping the first area, or the second area, I guess, technically. So I like the first two options. Either don't change it or shuffle encounter rarity. So each area has, I think, 7 different potential encounters, and traditionally stuff like the T-Rex and the Iron Golems are in the very rare slot, or War Mech. This means you might have a very common War Mech on a floor that has, like, he'll still be only on the floors that you normally have him on. He won't show up on the overworld or anything. But instead of being like 1 in 100, maybe he'll be 1 in 2, and you'll see him every second fight. I don't know, maybe you'll get lucky. So anyway, I like that. This is a newer option. This is really good. The spike tiles, where you have a forced enemy encounter, are randomized. So no longer will the Marsh chest always have wizards. The Mirage Tower always have a blue dragon. They'll get randomized. And I don't know exactly how random formations work. I think if you leave it like this, certain tiles are all the same. So like in Marsh Cave, there's more than one wizard tile. They're just in the locked chests. They will all have wizards, or Cobra, the snakes, the green snakes. Whatever they randomize to, say they randomize to a War Mech. I hope that's possible. Then they'll all have War Mechs. I think if it's random formations, they all get randomized from the big pool. But again, it doesn't matter. This is great. Play with you as you want if you want more stuff. This is actually probably really important too. I like to shuffle everything. There's some settings you can do. So for one, this randomizes the. Sometimes you can do a little mouse over. You guys can't see it, but the mouse over on the checkbox explains it a bit. This one randomizes treasure chests. So they're generally shuffled. You generally want to shuffle them. That's the basic thing. So shuffle them around so that the chest that has the pick a thing, Blue, that's not incentivized. The chest that has oh man, I don't know, something half useful. The coral sword. It'll be somewhere else. But if you randomize it, the items that are potentially in the pool get shuffled. And this means specifically things that you haven't clicked as an incentive item. Incentive items are like guaranteed to be in a specific spot, generally. So that sort of excludes them from the random loot. So it's actually possible, if you don't incentivize Mazimune, to have it not show up. Or show up 5 times. Sounds pretty awesome. But that sort of depends on how lucky you want to be. So the wealth modifier seems to determine how good of equipment you'll find in maybe shops as well as chests. I'm not sure if shops are connected to that flag the same, because I've had really good luck with shops being way better selection than in the vanilla game with this tab. And it might be because I'm still on relatively wealthy, which is the second highest, normal. Like, I haven't tried the harder seeds where they probably will never see 3 Mazmunes. But anyway, if you think the game's too easy, you know, feel free to play it with less good loot anyway, basically. The main NPC items, that's the loot, ship, rod, canoe. You probably want to shuffle those unless you always want to get them in the same place. Like, you could this is how customizable the randomizer is. You can randomize all the treasure in the game, but keep the progression items in the same place, so the princess always gives you the loot. But that's kind of boring for me, so I like to randomize them. Fetch quest rewards. This one's arguable, but there's like turn-in quests. Like, you get the crystal. Well, you get the crown first. You turn it into the crystal. You turn the crystal into the herb. You turn the herb into the key, and then you turn the key into the TNT, and then the TNT into an escape. Actual progression. So that's a big, long fetch quest that essentially all it really does is get you out of the starter area. If you uncheck this, you will always get that quest chain. So you're looking for the first one in the chain, which is either the bottle or the crown, basically. And that's pretty much it. Yeah. Maybe not the crowns. I'm not sure if it starts. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Point is, I like to randomize it, so anybody that can give you a quest reward like Matoya, there's not a guarantee that she gives you the herb anymore. She'll give you, well, if you want, an incentivized item, which is what we'll be doing. It'll still be good to go to these people, but it won't be guaranteed to get. You won't know what you're going to get. And then the objectives are Bahamut, Dr. Un, and the Elf Doctor, which are basically the same, except one is optional promotion, one is usually the chime, and one is essentially the key. But I just randomize all that. The only thing I'm going to talk about this is, if you don't understand incentivized locations, these are places that are guaranteed to give you a short list of items, and then these are the items that you're putting on the short list. Automatically required items, like probably the airship, the key, the loot, stuff like that, they're just automatically added to this pool. So you want to make sure, well, it depends on how you want to play, but you want to make sure you have enough locations to cover as many items as you want. And I did add them all up at some point. I think if you select everything here, and with these settings as well, there's 23 total locations, and if you just count down to here, I think there's 21 items. So if you want further, you're adding more items to the pool. With my current settings, keeping in mind this is how I like to play. I'm not a huge fan of adding an incentivized location in the locked marsh chest. This usually means you do the marsh, you may need to do the marsh cave, get the wizard chest where you normally get the crown, and then come back later with the key to get another incentivized item. I'm trying to limit the amount of double dips, basically, so I don't like that one, but the rest are all fine. And I needed more locations. So the trick is, if you've got more incentivized items, and sometimes items are not actually incentivized, like the bridge is technically an item that will give you progression out of Castle Corneria area. Maybe. Or you could get the airship right away, and then you don't need it ever. So if you don't need it, I don't think it's technically considered incentivized. But it could be. It just depends on how the logic of the game randomizes. But anyway, the problem is if you add more items to this list than you have total locations, some of them will be in a random chest somewhere, which could be the loot, which you absolutely need to finish the game. And if the loot gets randomized because you ran out of chests, basically, you ran out of confirmed incentive locations, you used them all for your hammers and your swords and stuff, then you're going to have to open up random chests across the game until you finally find that loot, potentially 100%ing the game. So I would recommend trying to make sure you've got more locations than items, and don't check all of these off unless you are maybe in for some pain. Like I said, though, there is some balancing between whether or not if you have random treasures, if you incentivize certain items like the ribbon and Mazimune, I think you will always have one guaranteed somewhere of each. The ribbons will normally be shuffled into... The other two ribbons will still be shuffled unless you have bad luck or bad options. And I believe if they're incentivized, they won't show up in the shop. So by having these open, they could be in a shop, so you could just buy them. Or you might find a few, or 0. So that's kind of the luck of the draw. Probably playing on Melman difficulty would be the one where you don't get any of the good items. So you might want to incentivize something that you think... Like, if you're playing a solo challenge, you might say, I can't beat the game without a ribbon, so I have to at least make sure there's one. So that's kind of that. Anyway, this stuff we're not going to go into. There's a few different finales if you want to just gather up items, or get the 4 orbs from the fiends like normal, or you can do like an extra long one with more orbs, more shards to find. You could just do rush mode where you just quickly go beat the game as quick as you can without killing the fiends. You can have alternatives to chaos at the end, which are usually pretty easy in my experience, but it's a potential option. And then shorten Temple of Fiends Revisited means you don't do the floors between the start and chaos. You just start on chaos's floor and fight them. Or if you want, you can include trap tiles for all the fiends, which is probably smart. I'm just gonna leave this to normal. I highly recommend turning on some options in the map. I really like open progression and the even more open progression. This gives the randomizer more abilities to randomize the route you take through the game by having different paths, so you're not necessarily stuck always getting the bridge first and then the ship and then opening the canal to get out of the inner sea and then killing the lich and then getting the canoe. Like, you don't necessarily have to follow that path. This tends to give you more options, and you might randomly get the same progression as vanilla, but it's far more likely. Like, I've had a test game where I didn't get the airship for a very long time, or the ship, or the canal. Like, I was basically stuck sort of landlocked with the canoe. So I could get everywhere on the starter continent. Like, I couldn't get to Melmond area, but I could get everywhere on the starter continent. Because I had these also enabled, I was able to get to and I think it was technically my ice cave entrance led to the Titan's cave. I did eventually find a ruby, and you could exit the cave on the other side, which usually takes you to Sarda's hut. In my case, it took me to Onrak, up in the northwest, where I then walked with my canoe up to the waterfall, where I found a dungeon, which I did for big long dungeon, which eventually found me the floater, and then I went all the way back to the normal desert, got the floater, and suddenly the game opened up. And that was such an awesome setup that I had to like tell you the story, because like that was I could never have imagined using a cave to get to a northwest continent. I assume it's potential to get to anywhere with linked like more than one area, like maybe even some of the Dragon Isles, where there's that one Dragon Isle with 2 entrances if you randomize the entrances. Anyway, I really like these, so I highly recommend them. There's some minor edits. I don't really like the random top of sky castle teleporter. It just randomizes where one teleporter is. It's fine, but I'm not a huge fan. And then these things are all not that big a deal. I like randomizing towns. This is a fairly simple this is a new one too. This is a technically not too dangerous randomizer. Corneria town will always be the same. I think the castles, like castles, count as a different, like a dungeon entrance in this term. So Corneria Castle will always be there if you don't shovel that. But Provoca, Elfland, they might all be switched. So you might get a Melmund and Leafian right off the bat, for instance, instead of having Provoca and Elfland. Anyway, it's cool. I like that. I do like the entrance shuffler. This one randomizes all the other entrances, the castles, the caves and stuff. So Corneria Castle might instead be I don't know, the it could be anything. Any other, you know, could be Marsh Cave, could be the volcano, whatever, could be anything. That's cool. It takes a little bit of keeping track of things, because oftentimes you'll find like Bahamut's promotion area, but not have the tail ready or whatever item you want, because technically we also shuffled, I don't know if I mentioned it, but there's a way to shuffle the objectives, so Bahamut and Dr. Un might switch places. Anyway, it's cool. I recommend trying this one out, see if you like it. It's not too hard to keep track of. Towns is pretty easy, entrances is pretty easy. But do not select this unless you are ready for it. This randomizes the floors inside every dungeon. So not only will the entrances be randomized, but every next floor will be randomized. So you might start in the Marsh Cave, and then go to one of, like, floor 3 on the Earth Cave, and then floor 5 of the volcano, or whatever. It's really hard to keep track of, and you almost definitely have to use notes, which puts it, for me anyway, in the same category as Magic Shop Shuffle, where you have to almost definitely take notes to play through it. Now, I will show it as we play the game. The randomizer mod has made things easier to tell what area of the map you're in. Each dungeon will look slightly different for color palette based on the entrance you use to go into it. So the volcano will always look kind of red and fiery, but if you shuffle your entrances and suddenly the volcano is the sea shrine, which I have seen, you'll get a very red, lava-y looking sea shrine. It'll still be the sea shrine, like this, and you'll go through and kill the Kraken. But everything will be kind of red tinted, and that'll help keep track of where you started. If you shuffle the floors, all floors connected to that entrance will be, if you start at the volcano, they will all be red. So there is some in-game help, but I still recommend caution. There's options for War Mech. Because I'm hoping to get more common War Mech shuffles, I'm just going to leave him in his normal vanilla location. Scaling, this is a tricky part. There's a way to clamp the minimum numbers here for your enemy stats and stuff. This would certainly make bosses more interesting, and if I was playing a harder seed, I would definitely do something like minimum 100% strength, maximum 200, and that's a little bit fairer. If you leave it unclamped, you have the potential to have very easy bosses with, like, you could have a 20%, if you scale this all the way up. You could get a Chaos with, like, 200, 400 HP or whatever. You kill them in one hit. So that would be potentially really easy or very, very difficult. Or you could clamp it and it will always be difficult. So if you're trying to go for bosses, I like that. We're just going to leave it at the defaults, which is, could be difficult, could be easy. Overall, it's fairly well balanced. What I'm going to do here is, for our Let's Play, I'm going to boost up the experience growth a fair bit, because I don't want to spend a lot of time grinding. I kind of prefer these settings. I've been testing them out a little bit. 3 times the experience per combat, plus a base of 200. You can change that if you want. That makes the early game grind, like the flat modifier is really good early game. The multiplier is good later in the game, primarily. This is probably a little bit too high for challenge runs. And if you're playing a solo character, this is way too much. A solo character will level 50 in no time. But I feel like that helps. I like the experience and gold scaling per key item. We're actually going to put it at 10%, and it'll be fine. Every time you get, like, the loot or it gives you another reason to collect those key items, because then after that you get more experience. I thought that was really cool. And we're turning down random encounters by 33%. Don't worry, there are still millions of encounters, but this will help speed up the Let's Play, and it'll also balance out the experience. We're getting into less fights, the fights are more rewarding. Overall, we won't level up too much more than if you're at 2 times modifier, ish. So that's kind of what I was thinking. There's much better party selection now if you want to randomize your starting party. There's this null character, so if you want a challenge run, you force 3 empty slots and either randomize or pick your solo character, and then you can't cheat. You can't resurrect an extra fighter to make the final boss easier or something. So that's cool for challenge runs for sure. I've definitely tried that out a couple times. And for our Let's Play, I think we're just going to force a random a random party. It doesn't really matter what I get, unless I get like 3, I don't know, 3 thieves or something. We'll just go with whatever it gives us. Conveniences, I want to talk about this a little bit too. These are all like fixes in my book, so you should probably leave all of these on, because this makes the game not really easier, but faster or more fun to play. I was torn on these items. This is getting an incentive item early without having to do their main quest. So normally to get Sarda's item, you have to kill the vampire. Normally to get the Sage's item, you have to kill the Lich. And normally to get into Ordeals, you need the crown. But what I decided was killing the Lich is blocked by getting the rod. 100% you need the rod plus access and strength to kill the Lich. That always gates this item to the late game, and I hate it when this is the tail or something, and then you can't get this till right before you fight Chaos, because you might not find the rod till the very end. So I like to be able to at least access this incentive item a little bit earlier. I think it helps the overall shuffling. So that one I decided I liked. The Sage, this is the rod. So I was meaning the Sage item. The Sarda item, the reason I like to allow early access is instead of, if you basically killing the vampire triggered 2 quest items, because I set the Earth Cave chest, which is technically the vampire chest. So if you kill the vampire, you get 1 incentive item plus another one. So I thought 2 incentive items for 1 dip, and that would be a double dip again. Seemed like dumb. So I didn't want to do that. So if you can find, or, you know, if you get the airship or the ruby, you can get Sarda's item. If you can get to ship or canoe, you can get the Sage item. And then the crown had the same problem, where once you had the crown, you could automatically get Astos' item, because he's usually a pretty easy boss. So essentially you'd get the Ordeals item, which is normally the tail, but it's another incentive slot. So basically the crown would unlock 2 items. So I thought crown 1 item, vampire 1 item, and Lich, let's not talk about the Lich. So anyway, and I didn't give myself any easy modes. Bug fixes, I suggest leaving them all on, because this is just making the game better, unless, like, if you're playing a solo challenge, some of these things make it harder a little bit, but overall, this is making the game the way it was supposed to be. Fun percent, most of these don't matter much. I think Modern Battlefield makes when you saw the beginning of this video, I think this makes things look nicer, but that's just, it makes it look like Final Fantasy 2 and 3. Palette swap, I'm not a huge fan of. Disable tile flickers, great when you're walking on lava, the screen flickering. Obviously, we talked about battle palettes. Enemy names, enemy sprites for a couple specific items. The randomizer community has some things. And, I mean, that's it. So, I know I probably spent way longer than I planned on, but that's my overview of this seed that we're going to play right now. So, I've got my file uploaded that's got my sprites. I'm going to new seed it. I've set all my flags. Let's randomize. We'll get something here. It'll just take me a second to copy the file over. Bear with me, guys. Rename it something that I can remember when I'm in the emulator. Rando LP. Okay, so let's switch over and actually play the game. Should I split up the episodes? I don't know. I don't expect this will take too long.